Now we can also use compare to compare two strings. So here I'm declaring two strings. String 1 is green apple, string 2 is red apple. And I'm comparing whether string 1 is equal to string 2. Now to do that, you can do string 1 dot compare string 2. If the two strings are equal, compare will return 0. If the two strings are not equal, we will get a non-zero number. So let's see what will be the output after the first if condition. We know that green apple is not red apple, so let's see whether that is the print. Okay, so here the comparison failed and we see green apple is not red apple. Now next, I'm showing you how to use this compare function in a different way. Here we can provide what is the first position in string underscore 1 where we want to start the comparison from. And the second parameter to this function says how many characters in string underscore 1 we want to compare. So here I'm saying I want to compare from the 6th position. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So beginning from 6, I want to compare the next 5 characters, which is apple. And I want to compare it with a string literal, which is also equal to apple. So if these two are the same, then we should see that it's still an apple. So let's continue. Okay, so notice still green apple is an apple. So since apple is part of this green apple and we are checking a substring of green apple, we're comparing the substring of green apple with apple, we see that apple is part of green apple. Now in the second example, I'm checking whether apple is part of string underscore 2. To do this, first I'm finding what is the size of this second string, and I'm going to the 5th position from the end. So in the first example we saw that apple begins at the 6th position from the beginning. Now let's see where apple begins from the end. So this is end minus 1, end minus 2, end minus 3, end minus 4, end minus 5. So if we go to end minus 5 and look at the next 5 characters in string underscore 2, it should also be equal to apple. So this comparison should also be equal to 0. So the result is and red apple is also an apple. Now we can use another inbuilt method to find a substring within a string. So to find apple within red apple, I'm calling string underscore 2 dot substring at position 4, and I'm asking what are the next 5 characters. So position 1 is R, position 2 is E, position D, position 3 is D. Then we have a space, and position 4 is the first place where we see this substring apple. So from 4 to the next 5 characters should be apple. So here, when we execute this substring, we should see apple on the right hand side. And in the next line, I'm just comparing. So I've replaced this string literal apple with this string variable apple now. So if this is equal to 0, then we see the print that both of them are apples. Okay. Now notice the print states that both of these are apples. So a green apple and a red apple is both apple. They're not two equal strings, but they have a substring which is common between both of them. So this was a short demonstration of char and strings in C++. Now I'll switch to a new topic. So I'll show you how to use stdcin and verify whether a user input is as expected, or what should we do when the user inputs something that is not expected. So first, stdcin uses spaces to delimit a sequence of characters. So let's look at an example of what that means. Here I'm declaring a string variable called name, I'm declaring an integer age, and I'm asking a user to enter a name and an age. So let's see what happens when we try to enter a character sequence like this. So let's continue the program. Now instead of entering a name, I'm entering Jimmy-Bob in space with a number, which is age. So let's see what happens when I execute this. So when we execute this line, now notice name is Jimmy-Bob, which is the name that we wanted. However, the age is also initialized. Now the age is initialized with the value with this 32. So first time when std::cin name was executed, the name Jimmy-Bob was right. And since we have a space next, std::cin is waiting at the space. The next time you call std::cin with age, it reads from wherever it was waiting in the last call and reads whatever is the next characters until the end of line. So 32 is by default read into this variable age, even though this was not intended. So when we are working with std::cin, we need to remember that it is delimited by space. So if we have two std::cin calls and if we enter a name or any character sequence with a space, the second input will be initialized with whatever is after the space. Now let's look at an example of how to check whether a user inputs a value correctly or not. So here I've declared an integer x and I'm asking a user to input an integer. However, the user can input a string, a double, a float, or anything else instead of an integer. Now how can we check whether the user inputs an integer or not and make sure that the user inputs the correct data type that we are looking for? To do this, we can use the inbuilt method called fail. So within std::cin, there is a function called fail. If you call this function fail and check its return value, you can check whether the user's input failed or passed. So when I provide a string, for example, instead of an integer, this function will return a false. Or this function should return a true, which means the input failed. So when the input fails, we provide this new print which says that we are looking for an integer. And then we are clearing the flag which is stored to check whether the input failed or not. So std::cin.clear will clear the flag that is stored to mark whether the input failed or not. And then we are using std::cin::ignore to ignore any other characters in this particular line. So the way it works is, we will see this through examples. So let's continue the execution. So first I'm providing a number. This works. So we see that the number is good. So we see 1 back on the print. Now instead of a number, let's see what happens if I type hello world. Oh, I need to first remove this breakpoint. Let's see what happens when I print hello world. Now notice we got the print statement which says that we are looking for an integer. So hello world is not an integer, therefore the default value which was equal to 0 is the value that will be printed. Now I can mix characters and integers, so I can say 1a 1p, and let's see what will be the value of x. Now notice the value of x is 1. So std::cin reads all characters until the first character where it fails. So here we have an integer in the beginning, then we have a which is not an integer, so it fails at the second position. So whatever is the position at which it fails is where std::cin stops. And since we have this call for std::cin::ignore, which takes 2 arguments. The first argument is how many characters to ignore, and the second argument is what is the second argument here says that we want to ignore until the new line. So everything from where it fails until the new line will be ignored. And now let's try a bigger number mixed with characters. Now notice x is equal to 1, 2, 3, 4. So again, since the first 4 now are digits and the next one is an alphabet, stdcin fails at the 5th position, so whatever is before the 5th position will be stored in the integer x. Similarly, we can provide a decimal number, and whatever is before the decimal, the integral part, will be stored in x. So yeah, so this is the way you would want to now modify your future programs to check whether the user inputs what is expected. If the user does not provide an expected data type, then you can ask the user to provide a new data type, new input, and give a hint as to what is the data type that you're looking for. This also will be useful in your next homework, so you can use this example code from Canvas. So this concludes the topic from char and string. Next week we will begin with pointers. Thank you.